Welcome back to Faith-Infused Leadership. I am your co-host, Meredith Banka, and I'm excited as always to be here with Debbie Heiser, who is the founder of Faith-Infused Leadership and also the owner of Three Vines Consulting. How are you, Debbie?
Good morning. I am doing fantastic. Thank you. And yourself?
I'm really good. I'm really loving summer. Got to say, it's my favorite time of the year, so it's absolutely awesome. How about you?
I am enjoying the same thing, and being in North Idaho, the days are beautiful and the evenings have been really nice and cool, which is a welcome relief here from the past few summers. So getting out on the water and getting outside has been really important this year. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So today we're talking about a really interesting concept. We're talking about KPIs of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Is that even possible? I mean, is it?
Well, it's funny, Meredith, because that can go in so many different ways. And I want to focus on three kind of important segments of that to begin with, because in order to be able to measure your own leadership skills, there are three kind of what I consider avenues to measure, to set up baselines and allow you then to look at the holistic picture. So an example of that would be, I use a three-legged stool many times to introduce concepts. And in this case, I look at the client or customer, whichever you want to name them, your employees, or if you're a solopreneur, yourself as an employee, and then the business itself. So the P&L, the bottom line, is it good for the growth of the business or whatever those goals are that you have for that business. In a corporate setting, it would be for the business plan, kind of the mission and vision and strategies for that business. And if any one of those legs are cut off too short or so much longer than the rest, your three-legged stool won't stand. And so it's really about, they don't all have to be exactly even, but there needs to be some format of evenness amongst those three legs, or again, it topples. And so when I look at client or customer, there are certain things to uncover, but it's important to understand the objective of whatever you're trying to uncover. So if you're trying to uncover satisfaction, whether it be a service industry or if it's a retail type of industry, what their experience was like, a lot of experience-driven information right now is out there. And so what was the client experience or the customer experience? And there are different ways to do that. Another thing with clients, you could measure how many times they come back for your service. But it's important to uncover what it is that you need to measure with that client or customer in order to, because it's going to be specific to each business. And each business will have different ways of doing that.
So let me ask you, I think there's a lot of pressure on managers to just measure, period, right? Have a dashboard, measure this thing, measure that thing, bring me the data. Everybody wants that information. And now we're trying to put that lens onto something that's a little squishier, which is leadership, right? This isn't, how many widgets are we making in an hour? We're talking about people and their emotions and their behavior and their value and their worth. And so I think for managers, do you feel like they see that as a problem? Like maybe they don't understand how to leap from measuring the very black and white to measuring this thing that's a little bit squishier.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think there's a lot of times what ends up happening is there's such a focus on the bottom line that we feel like we have to have these hardcore widget numbers. And where it gets squishier, it is harder to define that one particular thing made the movement. Usually those, to use your word, squishier metrics tend to be multiple different things that can feed into that. So it's important that when you set these up, that, whether it's a focus group, whether it's a survey that you do, whether it's somebody calling, very effective ways of having people even place phone calls to customers that they've had and talk about the experience and having a matrix set up. You can create numbers around those, but it's important to understand the concept, almost like doing a scientific experiment. where you understand the, I'm losing the right scientific word, but you have certain parameters around what it is. So it might be a client that's done business with you in the last week. It might be a client that you've had over the last 6 months. And, so you have certain perimeters that will help you understand where there might be some differentiation in the numbers. That's important because multiple factors can go into that. I think what happens is a lot of times two things. There's paralysis by analysis because we don't understand sometimes how to analyze those numbers and then make a difference with those numbers. And so what ends up happening is we look at all the numbers and think that's the important piece of it, and analyzing it then becomes, oh, well, this moved by 2 points. Okay, well, why? That's the real analysis. Why did it move by 2 points? And if it's a negative move, then what occurred? Were there external factors or internal factors that happened to go with that? What was the client base that you actually went out and surveyed? Was it 100 people or was it 10 people? So understanding that part of it and teaching our leaders how to analyze that information is really important, because key performance indicators are just that. You look for the key indicators, not the 12 that you're measuring. And I'm making that up because some companies have 20 or 30 things they measure, which is way too much. It's about uncovering what the purpose of measurement is for and picking those 1 or 2 things that give you the best data for that information. And I don't mean the best data, meaning swaying in the way that you want it to go. I mean, gives you the richest form of data.
Right. Okay, so I'm a manager. I want to start measuring these things, right? Some of them are solid, some of them are this way, some of them are not. I get those metrics in order. I do all of that. What's possible for me as that manager, as that leader, once I start to collect this data and analyze it?
Yeah, so Meredith, I want to go back really quickly and talk about the 3 legs in addressing this. So I am a firm believer that you need to get information back from the client or customer. You need information that is from your employee, or again, if it's you, yourself as an employee. And then you need information about the business. So that would be, some of those metrics that are hardcore around, maybe it is, how many people did I serve this month and how many openings do I still have available, or how many widgets did I produce and how many could I produce, that type of thing. As well as P&L, right? Like what's the bottom line profit piece? And so when you look at those, if I think about your question and remind me of the question. I'm so sorry, because I got
Well, like what's possible? Sometimes I feel like, again, we have this pressure to measure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it becomes just another box on our to-do list to check, rather than something that we recognize as a tool to help us move forward toward what's possible.
Yep, thank you. So on that 3-legged stool, if you're looking at the monetary pieces of it, you're looking at some of those, what's good for the business. The other 2 legs of that stool, if you make impact in any one of those 2 areas with clients/customers or with employees, you're going to impact the bottom line. So, and I've seen it happen. It's not just an opinion. And so when I look at that, what's possible with it also depends on what your goals are. Every organization is different. Every organization has a different culture. But if I'm someone that I'm losing customers and I don't know why, well, then what's possible about that is uncovering why you're losing customers. And I'm going to set up a way to gather key performance indicators based on that information. Now, some of that is just feedback, but it's important to understand that those KPIs are also then around how many clients do I have this month? How many do I have next month? How many do I retain? Those may be the 3 things. Well, it's actually 2. How many clients do you have and how many retained and how many new did you get? So if you look at those 3 things, then it gives you an idea when you step back and actually do the analysis and say what happened in that month that potentially we lost those clients from. And there might be other feedback things that you need to go out and do with those clients that you lost. And then why is it that we actually gained this many clients? Oh, well, we ran a special on come in and buy produce and we'll give you 50% off at the meat market. I'm just making this up if it was like a market. Or if it's a client that's doing work like I am, it could be that I did a conference and all of a sudden I added 3 or 4 clients from this conference, where 2 months from now, not doing a conference, I may not have anyone. So it then allows me to look at that data, and based on the goals that I have for my organization, to be able to look at those levers and determine which levers I want to pull. And then it helps me build the strategy behind why or how I'm going to pull those levers. So the possibilities are endless. Same thing with employees. It could be that I have a culture that doesn't have real strong accountability, and I want to shift that accountability culture, where I'm going to set up certain, and you have to have a baseline. You can't just go in this and say, oh, I'm going to measure this and it's going to tell me X, Y, and Z. So you have to create the baseline. And you need people like myself that understand how to do this to help you set that up. Because there are also ways that you can do it that won't give you any information that you need. And so setting up an employee satisfaction survey, setting up and observing expectations being given, and how are those expectations provided, to give some or do you have expectations of employees? So uncovering some of that information to then say, okay, we're going to do an employee satisfaction survey, and we're going to have 5 questions out of 20 that are very specific towards accountability, culture. And so we're going to measure what that is today, and then here's some strategies that we can put into place to help move that lever. And again, that's part of the analysis and understanding the feedback, to then set up those strategies and then measure it a year from now or 2 years from now, depending on the length of that project. And then you're going to have some real life numbers that show the movement or lack thereof. It is important, and I don't want to say have a historian, but it is important then also to quickly jot down external and internal factors that occur each month, so that a year from now, when you take that, you can see what you did in a strategic business plan, and or if there were external factors that occurred. The real estate market right now is going crazy. There are going to be some external factors, potentially even if President Trump gets reelected or doesn't get elected, that's going to be an external factor that not only affects real estate, but that would impact real estate. And so it's important to note that. So if you see some anomalies in things, that you understand where those anomalies are. Does that help answer that question?
Yeah, for sure.
Possibilities are limitless, but you have to get really narrowed in on what is the purpose of you measuring something.
Right. So a couple more things that I think are important to talk about here. One of them is, I'm sure we've all been around those people in our organization that kind of control the outputs of their analysis, control the outputs of their measurement. People all will say, numbers don't lie, but you can make them say anything you want them to.
There is some truth to that, yes.
And so there's this that's component of what is almost the spirit that you recommend somebody approach this measurement with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I think about the spirit of this, and even thinking about this being faith-infused leadership, my philosophy is that I'm going about it to help. So it's about, if I'm helping the business, which is the ultimate, kind of thing usually for any organization, because I can do all sorts of great things for employees and clients, but if I'm not making any money, I'm not going to be a business, right? So it's really then looking at and saying, if I'm here to help my clients have the best experience and do whatever it is that my mission is, then I'm going to come at it with the spirit of openness and wanting to hear the feedback to get better, not in an ego state where, and I'm talking about little s self, where I'm taking in and I'm being defensive. And sometimes that's really difficult, and you have to be willing to listen to the feedback, and not just listen to the feedback, but also then come back and readdress it and say, thank you for this feedback. Here's the things we implemented because of this feedback. or we took this under consideration and that's not a direction that we're going with our business right now. You may get feedback from a client that says, you know, let's say that you're a small women's clothing retailer and you say, you get some feedback that says, I really wish you'd carry little girls' kids' clothes. Well, that may not be in the path of what your business is, but it's important to come back and say, thank you for that feedback. It's not within the mission of our company right now, but it's something we'll take into consideration for future. Or if somebody gives you feedback that the quality is not the greatest, you can come back and say, thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. We're now out seeking additional suppliers, you know, X, Y, and Z, but it's important to follow up with that. Otherwise, the intention of being out there, if it's just to improve your business, which I am still a firm believer, when you do the right things and you're servicing a client and the employees in the best way, the business will come up, you know, like your key performance indicators for the business will help itself, but you have to also look at those. It's not magic. You know, you have to look at those and say, what are those key levers that we want to push? And there are certain things that you'll do with marketing to help push that. I don't mean to say that's not important, but if you take care of those other two legs, that third leg is going to help happen.
Sure. I can see that for sure. And I also wonder if you can share, like, most of the clients that you work with, are they coming to you and they're not measuring at all? They're measuring some things, they're measuring everything, but not doing the analysis. Like, where do you see businesses most often stuck when it comes to KPIs and I'm going to stumble on that word, analyzing them. Yeah.
So I will tell you, the majority of people that I've been working with have been small business owners, entrepreneur, and middle-sized business owners recently. So I'm just using my recent experience. And I will say 80% of those people don't have any metrics.
Wow.
So, you know, other than I'm making a profit. And a lot of times entrepreneurs fall into that. And we don't fall in love with our metrics. We don't like to, most of my clients don't like to do financial pieces, and they don't like measuring. They don't like the numbers. And so it's really about helping them shift their perspective about what the numbers are. Many times they're overwhelmed with the whole thought. What you're saying is there's so many numbers out there I could be tracking, but they have to get really clear on what their vision and mission is, and what they're doing to help people in the community, in the world, whatever that is, to then identify. And what ends up happening, Meredith, too, is then they'll jump into it and say, I want to measure these 10 things around the client. Well, no. Let's pick one. Let's just get good at one, right? Because that's more than what you had before. And so it is, those tend to be the things that happen with the folks I'm working with. What I've seen in my experience in corporate America is the opposite of that. To your point, we're measuring so much that it's overwhelming and it becomes diluted. And so it's really important, I think, then too, as a leader, if you have 10 things that you've been asked to track. I'm going to use an example as a training manager. It was, you know, what they call level 1, like what was the satisfaction of the people in training? Level 2 was, what did they know when they came in the room? What did they know when they left? And was there an improvement? The third was, did they apply the skills and having observations done from that? And then the fourth was, you know, some type of impact to the business. And we had to pick what that was. Well, there's 10 different ways you could get each of those numbers. And we had to pick which tool we wanted to use for that and why we wanted to use that tool. And then what did it tell us, but also identify maybe there's some things missing from this because we are only getting maybe one person's observation of whether or not they're applying it, you know, and so you have to work in those parameters, but really uncovering those key performance indicators that are going to give you the information that you need. Because if you get 10 pieces of information, sometimes too, they even conflict. It reminds me of the health industry, you know, the diet industry that's out there. Eat paleo, that's going to do it for you. No, eat all the fruits and vegetables, you know, and it's different for each body type, just like it's different for each organization. And even in a larger organization, and I'm even talking a middle-sized business, if you have departments those key performance indicators are probably going to be different for each department because they do different pieces of work.
Mm-hmm.
They interact with the client differently and or not even at all. They may provide support material for a client interaction. So that has to look different because your customer now is your internal customer.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm marketing and I'm providing Salesforce collateral to help sell the product, I need to be looking at my Salesforce as my client,
Mm-hmm.
but looking at the overall client then as the bigger client for the business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. I mean, it's a huge topic for sure, and I can see why people get lost in it, especially, you know, the clients that you've shared with us that you're working with now. I mean, it's really easy to see people don't put a focus on it, but when you do, amazing things can happen.
Absolutely.
So if I wanted to find out more about this, or if people wanted a little bit more information, what would you recommend that they do?
Yeah, I would recommend to you to go out to my website at www.3 spelled out THREE V as in Victor consulting.com and sign up for our mailing list. I have blogs and different pieces of content that come out, so you don't want to miss that. So you can learn a little bit more about which KPIs to take a look at.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, for this episode of Faith-Infused Leadership, I'm your co-host, Meredith Binka, with our host, Debbie Heiser. It's been great spending this time with you, and we'll see you the next time.